Yeah, a virus is more than a simply located
Yeah, so what's
object.
like a transdisciplinary look at the virus phenomena?
Yeah, okay, so, I don't know. I've avoided talking about the virus on YouTube because it's controversial and videos get flagged and accounts get suspended, and it's very, it's a touchy subject, and so...
We've transitioned into a new era of, internet media.
Yeah, but YouTube is a monopoly that kind of filters out things that it deems to be too far afield of the norm.
Yeah.
The norm as decided by the corporate media, basically. And so many people's videos about the virus, talking to experts, if they contradict the mainline story, the videos are taken down. Or at best, they're given a label that says, this is false information.
Yeah.
And, I think as a general principle, there needs to be some filtering of information so that the public at large can distinguish knowledge from
there hasn't
hearsay.
Really had to be
right
before now. I mean, there has been in different ways, like burning books and stuff, but
right and
this is
the Catholic index of forbidden books and all that. But this is being the devil's in the details, and it's just not the general principle is being applied in a particular circumstance in such a way as to make me and you and a lot of people, I think, really uncomfortable. So, I don't know, rather than like wade into the political side of it right away, we can talk first about the metaphysical and really even just the biological knowledge. What our ideas of what a virus even are. What is our idea of the virus, and how do we think it works, and what does it really mean that we're confronted by this thing we're calling a virus now?
Yes.
Is part of the problem that you were saying just a second ago before I pushed record was viruses can't be understood atomistically.
Yes, not exclusively.
As a cause in and of themselves of anything.
Yes.
They're part of a larger network and process, and they play a role, clearly. And so that's the thing, right? Viruses have always played a role in the history of biological evolution.
Yes.
Our own human genome, as we call it, and that's another question. What is a genome? We can talk about the science, and even when we're done talking about all the latest science, and in fact, the more up-to-date we are with the science, the more ambiguous the definition of a genome becomes. So again, the genome, the virus, these are big ideas.
Yeah.
And we only have, we have limited knowledge of how they operate and what they even are. But viruses, if we know anything about how they work, it's that they are an integral component of the evolutionary process. So it's not just about genomes that belong to individual animals. It's about this lateral exchange of RNA or DNA.
They transform our genome, right?
They transform
our organism.
Yeah, and so one way or another, we're in relationship to this virome, as it's called, it's a part of the biome of the Earth. And so the question isn't like, can we avoid viruses? How do we keep ourselves safe from the evil virus? It's like, no, there's always has been, always will be a relationship. So how do we navigate that in a way that's life-fulfilling, I guess, is the ultimate question we would raise when we talk about a viral pandemic.
Yeah, there's an assumption that certain assumptions about life, that inform the kind of conventional picture of what a virus is when it's approached, in a reductionist way. And it makes sense that it's been especially approached in a reductionist way because it allows human beings to have more control and manipulate things to our favor, and that's been part of what has evolved, as the human being has evolved. But it's a kind of myopia.
Right, because we manipulate things that are in the foreground of our consciousness, not seeing the hidden connections to everything that's been backgrounded.
Yeah, well, And one thing that I'm thinking about when I am trying to understand what a transdisciplinary understanding of the virus would be is the fact that its potential origin, has arisen from the reductionist approach being pushed to a very far extent.
So the COVID-19 virus in particular, you mean?
Yes.
Was the result of what's called gain-of-function research.
Yes.
And it may have leaked from a lab.
Yes.
Yeah.
Potential.
Yeah, I think, and as you were saying, until Jon Stewart went on Colbert's Late Show and had that whole episode, just pointing out the obviousness of the at least possible connection between the lab in Wuhan of virology studying coronaviruses and this new, surprisingly well-adapted virus that just spreads easily through the human population. He's just pointing out the obvious.
Yes.
And so, but why does it? I don't even fully understand why it upsets people so much. That it might have been a lab leak. I don't know, but I think there's evidence to suggest it might have been. And actually, the lab leak and the wild origins explanation of the origin of the virus they're not that different. Like, they're both true in some ways.
There's a continuum that it's this juxtaposing them as if they're so intensely different is also like it kind of behind it you can discern metaphysical assumptions about life.
Yeah.
And like what constitutes living, and just the continuum of the, they say inorganic and the organic. Is the inorganic not bound up within the cosmic organic process? That's not what's being assumed. So, it's also then interesting to consider what it means, when we're looking this way in a more transdisciplinary way. I guess you could say more holistic way. What does it mean that we're using vaccines to, try and resolve and move through a situation that was potentially, arising from the human pushing of reductionism very far.
Yeah, technoscience.
Yeah.
As it's been called.
Technoscience.
So people get defensive about this because they want to be people who are pro-science liberals, basically. They want to say that, science should be in charge. We need to trust the scientists. And, of course, on some level I agree with them, but science is technoscience, and technoscience is it's an industrial complex of corporate capitalism.
Yeah.
So we don't have Darwins and Newtons running around as independent scientists doing groundbreaking
geniuses
work.
Who have a kind of philosophical,
right,
aspiration.
Scientists nowadays,
natural philosophy,
for the most part, even academics who aren't working for a corporation, they're searching for grants and contracts and jobs ultimately in the private sector.
Publications,
And so, science is embedded in this whole technocapitalist complex. We can't really pretend to separate it anymore, especially biological knowledge and knowledge of physics and all of the more, molecular biology in particular, these more reductionistic sciences. They're funded massively because they have marketable consequences. Knowledge can be
they're connected
applied to
power,
products.
And wealth.
So people get defensive when you say things like, oh, well, technoscience was messing around with a very dangerous thing that it didn't fully understand, and trying to, learn to manipulate this virus was kind of hubristic, and it escaped the lab, and now look at the consequences. But the comeback from the pro-science people would be, well, then science came up with these vaccines, just whipped them up in a year, and now we're, we have a chance to move past this pandemic and only have to deal with the 14 other reasons that the planet is in peril.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the vaccines then?
Well, I don't know. I think I mean, I'm glad I got one. But I think, this is like, it's such a historical moment because it is not just like the global pandemic that, united, and, even in conflict, the whole world in the same experience, even though, they may be different worlds, there was something that was shared, and, but that, that coinciding with this very public, implicating everyone on the planet, expression of what human beings have achieved through technoscience, and how that changes who we are. We're like at this moment where the human being is being redefined, and I think that is part of where all these, ideological warfares are going on, because Barfield he has this essay called The Coming Trauma of Materialism, and I think...
That was written in the 70s?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure what decade it was,
I think
but
so.
Probably, yeah, the 70s. But, yeah, he's just talking about how... that these metaphysical assumptions are being, constantly... I mean, in the 20th century, the new sciences and just constant challenges to the, I guess, the former paradigm that, includes an image of what it means to be human and what the world is and all that. That's beginning, especially now, to be, shift.
Right. So there's something about materialism which often suggests atomism and individualism.
Positivism.
And there's this, if you take a materialistic approach to viruses, one way of framing this is that people ask, is a virus alive or not? But the assumption is that cells are alive.
Yes,
but
it's the atomistic reductionist.
But if you're a materialist, there's no life. A cell is just a more complicated machine than a virus. Yeah. What are you talking about? Is a virus alive? Nothing's alive in a materialist universe.
That's the consequence of positivism, because there's the occlusion and also just rejection of the subject. And it is an omission of the subject. Right.
So no, viruses are not alive. And so, if you're a materialist, but what if you're not a materialist? What is a virus for an idealist or a spiritual person who thinks that there are purposes and archetypal powers and
there's a broader conception of life,
divine beings, elemental beings,
right? The life of the cosmos.
There's something else going on in the universe that's not just material.
That's when this transdisciplinary image begins to emerge, because then you see it sociologically, and you see it psychologically, and you see it spiritually, even if even if some of those are distorted.
Right. I like that sociology, psychology, spirituality.
It's spread out. It's a collective. It's no longer like minuscule and bounded like atomistic. It's no longer separate.
Right.
And invading. Then it's like, oh, what's going on here?
I feel like there's a lot of confusion in the public discourse around the virus, the confusion of levels, where some people are only talking about the biophysical dimension of it and the epidemiological dimension of it, and forgetting the psychological, sociological, and spiritual dimensions and the political dimensions. And unless you are explicit about when you're talking at which level, unless you have a sense of the whole.
Yeah, everything's mushed together.
Unless you have a sense of the cosmos and how the levels are ordered, you're going to be totally confused.
Yes, exactly.
Arguing with each other as if you're talking about the same thing, but you're not.
Yeah, that is, I feel like that, Barfield, just basically says it's working itself out, the whole process. And so the siloing of, different disciplines, and just like the kind of fragmentation of the sciences. I think this is related to that too, because, people are just like, they're focused on their field, basically.
Yeah, and that's what has made science so powerful.
Yes.
is its specialization and its ability to manipulate in a myopic way, as you said, the particular details according to a precise model that, makes valuable predictions. But it's myopic because the predictions of how this little system over here is going to behave if we poke it over here, those predictions are disconnected from the much larger...
the complexity.
The complexity. I don't even want to call it the larger system, because system implies we have knowledge of what it is. And I think there's a point where knowledge bleeds off into the encompassing being, which cannot be predicated. And so knowledge is finite. And when you consider the context of any specialized scientific knowledge, you have to accept that you don't know how your manipulations in this place are going to ramify. You don't know.
Yes, there needs to be that always, yes.
So it's not that you don't know anything. You have some intuition.
Yeah.
And you can say, I have a statistical... But statistics are...
It's just descriptive.
I don't trust this. I mean, statistics, I think, without intuition and a grasp
is
of
nothing.
like Gestalt
it's
is
a
nothing.
Skeleton, yeah.
Because you could statistically justify opposite
It just doesn't
arguments.
tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
It tells you how it looks when it's plotted.
So there needs to be more humility from everyone about the virus, the pandemic, future viruses, which there's...
Well, this is
will we beat COVID, but what's next?
Related to, what people describe of the initiation process. Because, the reason that we should be humble is because we don't know what's happening. We're totally being challenged, right? That's the metanoia. But it's like early in the process, and we all have the choice, how we will attend to it to make...
Right. So then I think the sticky problem is in the political domain. How is power to be wielded in the midst of a pandemic, right?
Oh my God.
The latest...
These last 2 years have been insane.
The latest news is that Biden is going to send people door to door to talk to people who decide to answer the door, whether or not they've been vaccinated, to just ask them. Because
I think that is probably going to cause a lot of civil unrest.
Yeah, I fear for the safety of these people who are going to be knocking on doors.
Well, just imagine all the people who are really, they think it's QAnon or something, and someone comes to their door, that's just playing into the potential paranoid narrative.
And yet, if we check the paranoia for a second, I don't
maybe I'm being paranoid.
I don't trust the government either, I'm not...
I'm not... Yeah, I don't either, but...
But who do you trust? And I think if we are going to have a democracy...
Yeah.
And where democracy means that there are people with rights to do as they please so long as they don't harm others. That's a simple way of framing, what a kind of negative freedom that undergirds American democracy is.
Yeah.
You need more than that to have a functioning society, though. You need a sense of positive freedom, a sense of...
wanting to participate.
Wanting to participate and
feeling
a sense of what society owes to individuals, or, what the individual owes as responsibility to society, and not just the freedoms from...
Who are we as people?
The responsibility too. And so that's the ideal form of, I think, participatory democracy, is that we all engage and participate in the formation of a public as a body, a public body, a political body, and we want to keep each other safe.
Yeah.
And in a pandemic, you keep each other safe by making sure that everyone has adequate knowledge and understanding. Doesn't mean you have perfect knowledge, but what's the best scientific perspective that we can take, both natural and spiritual science? What is the peer review tell us about what the adequate knowledge is in any given situation, like a pandemic? And I think let's just assume it was a spillover effect, just a consequence of some animal, its habitat being cut back to the extent that it interacted with humans for the first time and a virus was transmitted. That's, one of the theories. If that's the case, what do we learn from that? Well, we learned that we need to stop eliminating natural habitats, because then if we don't, we're just going to keep getting more viruses. And we also learned that, we learn about the effectiveness of vaccines, taking into consideration that they always have some side effects. And so, to what extent are those side effects less risky than
continuing to
the
live
virus
with
itself?
The virus, yeah. Well, I think even if this were to be the case, the two things that I think are especially, of course, this is related to the ecological one, it's all ecological, but in relation to what you were saying about habitat loss and just the encroachment of human civilization into the natural world, in a way that jeopardizes species ongoingness, on a hair away. But the two things I think, especially related to this, that I think the Anthropocene, like the notion of the Anthropocene, sits above both of them, is again like what the use of this kind of technology means for the human self-understanding, because it's opening doors to a lot of new things,
Right.
And like it's blowing people's minds, right? It's probably related to the Jupiter-Uranus cycle, those technological breakthroughs.
So mRNA and gene editing technology more broadly, let's say.
Yes, yeah.
Although mRNA vaccines like the Moderna and Pfizer are not editing the human genome.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
At least as far as all the available peer-reviewed science would suggest. They're just, using the ribosomes in the cells to produce a spike protein that activates the immune system and builds immunity to the actual spike protein of the COVID-19 virus. That's not, and there's no permanent change to the human genome. But the other side of this is, this kind of technology can be used. Now they know it works, basically, and it works really well. Like the side effects aren't, even with the Pfizer one, with the heart issues that some minuscule portion of the population was having, they seem to get better. It's not permanent. But then the point about viruses in the evolutionary past and the role that they've played in biological speciation is that, in a way, viruses are already vaccines, in the sense that there's a vector that crosses into and out of the genome of animals and plants and bacteria. Like, the genome is not individually owned. Yeah,
it's dispersed.
So the virus shows how, the genome...
Network.
Yeah, the genome, our human genome is environmental. Its ontology is extended into the ecosystem.
Well, doesn't this coincide also with scientific, observation or discovery of, like you were saying, the fact that different animal species, like, share
lateral gene transfer. Symbiogenesis.
Yeah, and I think they're also seeing that with the vaccine stuff, right?
Yeah.
That it's shared. So this is part of what's being realized, and that's also related to the planetary experience of the pandemic. And so I'm just thinking again of Barfield, and I feel like, maybe even beyond like these new technoscience tools, that what we're realizing, will to human beings in the future, seem almost like the way that we're realizing this, like the kind of the metaphysical that's implied behind it through the vaccine, is almost like a crude expression of, and like a very limited early understanding of it, which is to say, just like in relation to physics and our perception, our perception's relationship to the world, that we're creating it. I don't mean that in a simplistic way, but that there is this process of figuration, and if we're being epistemologically, it's the imagination. If we're being epistemologically consistent, we can't go outside of our consciousness to, in the positivistic way, to say anything.
To verify.
Yeah, to have a sense of the truth of our existence. So the vaccine and just the work and the medical, I think, is just like a very tiny aspect of it. It's kind of just like the virus, the way that we conceive of the virus, the same way that we conceive of the whole situation is that small of the small facet of the bigger picture.
So, I know you have your feelings about Timothy Morton, but I can't help but think of his notion of the hyper object.
Oh, I think that's a great term. I like that.
Just, you use it to refer to climate change, and I think it applies equally well to, the virus. And the virus is just another manifestation of the Anthropocene and this this dawning recognition of the ways that humanity and civilization never left the earth, never left nature, never became something that was not subject to a broader context of living and dying and earthly life,
cosmic life
and cosmic existence.